For centuries, people believed that certain creatures could defeat death, cure poison, and grant eternal life. This isn't fantasy. This is history. The dark side of pharmacy was once shaped by myth, medicine, and belief. Phoenix, dragon, unicorn. And this was only the beginning of a far darker history.
There was a time when a single creature could promise immortality. Welcome. Today I invite you to step far back in time, to an age long before modern science, when medicine was not defined by formulas and laboratories, but by myths, gods, rituals, and belief. What you are about to hear is an adaptation from Chronicles of Pharmacy, a remarkable work first published in 1910, and considered one of the most important historical records of the origins of pharmacy and medicine. This video marks the first episode in the Chronicles of Pharmacy series, and focuses on the opening chapter titled Myths of Pharmacy. In this chapter, we explore questions that may sound strange today. How did ancient civilizations understand illness? Were early medicines truly cures, or acts of faith? What role did gods, symbols, and ritual play in healing? And where did the line between medicine and magic truly begin? Many of the practices you'll hear about may feel unsettling, even unbelievable by modern standards. Yet for centuries, these beliefs were humanity's only defense against disease and suffering. This is not just the history of medicine. It is the story of humanity's earliest attempt to understand the body, pain, and survival itself. If you enjoy long-form historical storytelling, dark and fascinating origins of science, or calm, immersive narrations you can listen to while resting, traveling, or winding down, consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. Your support helps this series continue. This recording is meant to be experienced slowly. You may listen to it late at night, during a long drive, or whenever you wish to disconnect from the present and step into another world. The text will be read smoothly and without interruption, so you can follow the story without effort or distraction. Now let us return to a time when medicine was still a myth. Enjoy the journey. The earliest medical practitioners of any sort and among all peoples would almost certainly be, as we should designate them, herbalists, women in many cases. How they came to acquire knowledge of the healing properties of herbs, it is futile to discuss. Old writers often guess that they got hints by watching animals. Their own curiosity, suggesting experiments, would probably be a more fruitful source of their science, and from accidents, both happy and fatal, they would gradually acquire empiric learning. Very soon these herb experts would begin to prepare their remedies so as to make them easier to take or apply, making infusions, decoctions, and ointments. Thus, the art of pharmacy would be introduced. The herbalists and pharmacists among primitive tribes would accumulate facts and experience, and finding that their skill and services had a market value which enabled them to live without so much hard work as their neighbors, they would naturally surround their knowledge with mystery and keep it to themselves or in particular families. The profession of medicine being thus started, the inevitable theories of supernatural powers causing diseases would be encouraged, because these would promote the mystery already gathering round the practice of medicine, and from them would follow incantations, exorcisms, the association of priestcraft with the healing arts, and the superstitions, credulities, and impostures which have been its constant companions, and which are still too much in evidence. The inventors of medicine. Medicine and magic consequently became intimately associated, and useful facts, superstitious practices, and conscious and unconscious deceptions became blended into a mosaic which formed a fixed and reverenced system of medicine. Again, the supernatural powers were called in, and the credit of the revelation of this art, that is its total fabric, was attributed either to a divine being who had brought it from above, or to some gifted and inspired creature, who in consequence had been admitted into the family of the deities. In Egypt, Osiris and Isis, brother and sister, and at the same time husband and wife, were worshipped as the revealers of medical knowledge among most other sciences. Formulas credited to Isis were in existence in the time of Galen, but even that not too critical authority rejected these traditions without hesitation. In ancient Egypt, however, the priests who held in their possession all the secrets of medicine claimed Isis as the founder of their science. Some old legends explain that she acquired her knowledge of medicine from an angel named Amnul, one of the sons of God of whom we read in the book of Genesis. The science thus imparted to her was the price she exacted from him for the surrender of herself to him. The son of Isis, Horus, was identified by the Greeks with their Apollo, and to him also the discovery of medicine is attributed. The legend which associated the sons of God with the daughters of men before the flood, and the suggestion that they imparted a knowledge of medicine to the inhabitants of the earth, is traceable in the traditions of the Egyptians, the Assyrians, and the Persians, as well as in Jewish literature. In the 6th chapter of Genesis it is said that, "They saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all that they chose. From these unions came the race of giants, and the wickedness of man so great in the earth, that the destruction of the race by the flood resulted." The apocryphal Book of Enoch, composed, it is agreed, about 100 or 150 years before the birth of Christ, is very definite in regard to this legend, showing that it was current among the Jews at that period. We read in that book that they, the angels, dwelt with them and taught them sorcery, enchantments, the properties of roots and trees, magic signs, and the art of observing the stars. Alluding to one of these angels particularly, it is said, "He taught them the use of the bracelets and ornaments, the art of painting the eyelashes, the uses of precious stones, and all sorts of tinctures, so that the world was corrupted." Hermes. With Osiris and Isis is always associated the Egyptian Thoth, whom the Greeks called Hermes, and who is also identified with Mercury. He was described as the friend or the secretary of Osiris. Eusebius quotes an earlier author who identified Hermes with Moses, but if Moses was the inventor of medicine and all other sciences, it would be hardly exact to speak of him as learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Thoth, who is also claimed as a Phoenician, as Canaan the son of Ham, and as an associate of Saturn, attained perhaps the greatest fame as an inventor of medicine. He was the presumed author of the 6 sacred books which the Egyptian priests were bound to follow in their treatment of the sick. One of these books was specially devoted to pharmacy. Thoth, or Hermes, is supposed to have invented alchemy as well as medicine, the art of writing, arithmetic, laws, music, and the cultivation of the olive. According to Jamblichus, who wrote on the mysteries of Egypt in the reign of the Emperor Julian, the Egyptian priests then recognized 42 books as the genuine works of Hermes. 6 of these dealt respectively with anatomy, diseases in general, women's complaints, eye diseases, surgery, and the preparation of remedies. Jamblichus is not sure of their authenticity, and as already stated, Galen uncompromisingly declares them to be apocryphal. Other writers are far less modest than Jamblichus in their estimates of the number of the writings of Hermes. Seleucus totals them at 20,000, and Menaechon says 38,000. The legend of Hermes apparently grew up among the Alexandrian writers of the 1st century. It was from them that his surname Trismegistus, thrice great, originated. It was pretended that in the old Egyptian temples the works of Hermes were kept on papyri, and that the priests in treating diseases were bound to follow his directions implicitly. If they did, and the patient died, they were exonerated. but if they departed from the written instructions, they were liable to be condemned to death, even though the patient recovered. It is hardly necessary to say that in the preceding paragraph no attempt has been made to discuss modern research on ancient beliefs. Greek scholars, for example, trace the Greek Hermes to an Indian source, and assume the existence of two gods of the same name: Bacchus, Ammon, and Zoroaster. Bacchus, king of Assyria, and subsequently a deity, was claimed by some of the Eastern nations as the discoverer of medicine. He is supposed to have taught the medicinal value of the ivy, but it is more likely that he owes his medical reputation to his supposed invention of wine. Some old writers identify him with Noah. Hammon or Ammon or Amen, traced to Ham, the second son of Noah, has been honored as having originated medicine in Egypt. Some attribute the name of sal ammoniac to the temple of Ammon in the Libyan oasis, on the theory that it was first produced there from the dung of camels. Gum ammoniacum is similarly supposed to have been the gum of a shrub which grew in that locality. Zoroaster, who gave the Persians their religious system, is also counted among the inventors of medicine, perhaps because he was so generally regarded as the discoverer of magic. Apollo. Apollo, the reputed god of medicine among the Greeks, was the son of Jupiter and Latona. His divinity became associated with the sun, and his arrows, which often caused sudden death, were, according to modern expounders of ancient myths, only the rays of the sun. Many of his attributes were similar to those which the Egyptians credited to Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis, and it is evident that the Egyptian legend was incorporated with that of the early Greeks. Besides being the god of medicine, Apollo was the deity of music, poetry, and eloquence, and he was honored as the inventor of all these arts. He evidently possessed the jealousy of the artist in an abundant degree, for after his musical competition with Pan, Apollo playing the lyre and Pan the flute, when Molus, the arbiter, had awarded the victory to the former, Midas ventured to disagree with that opinion, and was thereupon provided with a pair of ass's ears. Marsyas, another flute player, having challenged Apollo, was burnt alive. Paeon, sometimes identified with Apollo, was the physician of Olympus. He is said to have first practiced in Egypt. In the 5th book of the Iliad, Homer describes how he cured the wound which Diomed had given to Mars. Paeon, sprinkling heavenly balm around, assuaged the glowing pangs and closed the wound. Aesculapius, son of Apollo and Coronis, had a more immediate connection with medicine than his father. He was taught its mysteries by Chiron the centaur, another of the legendary inventors of the art, who also taught Achilles and others. Aesculapius became so skillful that Castor and Pollux insisted on his accompanying the expedition of the Argonauts. Ultimately, he acquired the power of restoring the dead to life. But this perfection of his art was his ruin. Pluto, alarmed for the future of his own dominions, complained to Jupiter, and the Olympian ruler slew Aesculapius with a thunderbolt. Apollo was so incensed at this cruel judgment that he killed the Cyclops who had forged the thunderbolt. For this act of rebellion, Apollo was banished from Olympia and spent 9 years on earth, for some time as a shepherd in the service of the king of Thessaly. It was during this period that the story of his adventure with Daphne, 9 told by Ovid, and from which the quotation on the arms of the Society of Apothecaries is taken occurred. Ovid relates that Apollo, meeting Cupid, jeered at his child's bows and arrows as mere playthings. In revenge, Cupid forged 2 arrows, one of gold and the other of lead. The golden one he shot at Apollo to excite desire. The leaden arrow which repelled desire was shot at Daphne. The legend ends by the nymph being metamorphosed into a laurel which Apollo thenceforth wore as a wreath. One of the incidents narrated by Ovid represents the god telling the nymph who he is. Dryden's version makes him say, "Perhaps thou knowest not my superior state, and from that ignorance proceeds thy hate." A somewhat uncouth method of seeking to ingratiate himself with the reluctant lady. Among his attainments Apollo says, "Invention medicina meam est, opifert per orbem dicer, et herbam subjecta potentia nobis." Dryden versifies these lines thus: "Medicine is mine, what herbs and simples grow in fields and forests, all their powers I know, and am the great physician called below." The arms of the Society of Apothecaries are thus described in Burke's Encyclopedia of Heraldry, 1851. In shield Apollo, the inventor of physic, with his head radiant, holding in his left hand a bow, and in his right a serpent. About the shield a helm, thereupon a mantle, and for the crest, upon a wreath of their colors, a rhinoceros, supported by 2 unicorns, armed and ungulate. Upon a compartment to make the achievement complete, this motto, "Opifert per orbem dicer." It was William Camden, the famous antiquary and Clarence's king-at-arms in James I.'s reign, who hunted out the middle of the above Latin quotation for the newly incorporated Society of Apothecaries. The sons of Aesculapius. Aesculapius left 2 sons, who continued their father's profession, and 3 or 4 daughters. It is not possible to be chronologically exact with these semi-mythical personages, but according to the usual reckoning Aesculapius lived about 1250 BC. He would have been contemporary with Gideon, a judge of Israel, about 2 centuries after the death of Moses, and 2 centuries before the reign of King David. His sons Machaon and Podalyrus were immortalized in the Iliad among the Greek heroes who fought before Troy, and they exercised their surgical and medical skill on their comrades, as Homer relates. When Menelaus was wounded by an arrow shot by Pandarus, Machaon was sent for, and sucked the blood and sovereign balm infused, which Chiron gave and Aesculapius used. After the Trojan War, both brothers continued to practice their medical art, and some of their cures were recorded for posterity. Their sons also followed the same profession, and the earliest known temple of Asclepius is believed to have been built at Argos by Spirus, the second son of Machaon, in memory of his grandfather. It may originally have been intended simply as a place where the sick could stay and receive care, or perhaps it also served as an early form of public recognition for the healer's work. From that point onward, the worship of Asclepius spread widely. Temples dedicated to him are recorded at Titani in the Peloponnese, Tricca in Thessaly, Trithoria, Corinth, Epidaurus, Kos, Megalopolis in Arcadia, Lar in Laconia, Drepher, Drope, Corona on the Gulf of Messina, Egram, Delos, Cyllene, Smyrna, and Pergamos in Asia Minor. For a long time, the Temple of Epidaurus was considered the most important center of healing. However, before the time of Hippocrates, the temple at Kos appears to have taken the leading role. The daughters of Asclepius are often described as allegorical figures rather than historical individuals. Hygeia embodied health itself, while Panacea represented medicine and healing. Hygeia, in particular, was widely revered among the Greeks, and when wealthy people recovered from illness, they would often commission coins or medals bearing her image on the reverse side. According to Pliny, it was customary to offer her a simple cake made of fine flour, symbolizing the belief that good health was closely connected to moderation and simple living. Panacea was also elevated to divine status, and was believed to preside over the preparation and administration of medicines. The figures of Egeria and Iaso are far less well known. Egeria, whose name was associated with the light of the sun, was said to have married a serpent and was later transformed into a willow tree. Iaso, on the other hand, is known from only a single surviving monument, where she is depicted holding a small vessel, most likely containing healing ointment. More mythical even than the stories of Asclepius, or of Orpheus, who was also said to have uncovered some of the secrets of medicine, is the legend of Prometheus, the figure who stole fire from heaven for the benefit of humankind. According to early mythologists, Prometheus was identified with Magog and described as the son of Japheth. The primary authority for his story is Aeschylus. After listing many of the remarkable gifts Prometheus bestowed upon humanity, the poet has him declare that one of his greatest achievements was this: when people fell ill and found no relief, unable to eat or drink, uncertain how to treat themselves, and doomed to perish for lack of remedies, he taught them how to prepare healing medicines capable of curing disease. As Dean Plumptre later paraphrased, before Prometheus there were no bombs, no ointments, no potions. The sick simply wasted away until he revealed the art of combining gentle remedies by which illness could be resisted and overcome. In other words, Prometheus may be regarded as the first pharmacist. Melampus was a shepherd to whom, according to legend, we owe the medicinal use of hellebore and iron. From an early age, he studied nature with great care. As a young man, he raised several young serpents by hand, and they repaid his kindness in an extraordinary way. One day, while Melampus was asleep, 2 of the serpents crept up to his ears and cleansed them so thoroughly with their tongues that, upon waking, he discovered he could understand the language of birds and perceive many hidden truths previously unknown to humankind. Through this gift, he became renowned as a powerful magician and healer. While tending his goats, Melampus noticed that whenever they fed on black hellebore, they were purged. Later, a strange illness struck the women of Argos, driving them into madness. They ran naked through the fields, believing themselves to be cows. Among the afflicted were the 3 daughters of Proetus, king of Argos. Melampus agreed to cure the princesses and succeeded by giving them milk from goats that had eaten hellebore. As his reward, he received one of the princesses as his wife and 1/3 of the kingdom. Another famous cure attributed to Melampus was his treatment of Iphiclus, king of Phylacia, who longed to have children. Melampus prescribed iron rust mixed with wine, a remedy that proved effective and is considered the earliest form of vinum feri. Melampus is believed to have lived around 1380 BC. Glaucus, the son of Minos, king of Crete, was playing as a child when he fell into a large vat of honey and suffocated. When the boy could not be found, Minos summoned Polyidus of Argos, a renowned magician, and ordered him to locate his missing son. Polyidus discovered the child's lifeless body preserved in the honey. Convinced that a man capable of such insight must also be able to restore life, Minos commanded that Polyidus be shut inside the same vat. While struggling with the impossible task before him, Polyidus noticed a serpent creeping toward the vat. He seized and killed it. Shortly afterward, a second serpent appeared, observed the dead creature, then left and returned carrying a certain herb. Applying it to its fallen companion, the serpent soon brought it back to life. Taking the lesson, Polyidus used the same herb on Glaucus, with equally successful results, restoring the child to life. Glaucus was returned to his father, who rewarded the magician lavishly. Unfortunately, in recounting the rest of this tale, the storyteller neglects to tell us the name of the herb that possessed such extraordinary power. According to Pausanias, Polyidus was a nephew of Melampus. Chiron. The centaur was renowned for his deep knowledge of medicinal plants, which he acquired on Mount Pelion while hunting with Diana. The plant known as centauri is said to derive its name from him, either because he used it as a remedy or because it was applied to his own wound. Chiron's greatest contribution, however, was not merely his personal skill, but the fact that he passed on his medical knowledge to others, most notably to Asclepius, Hercules, Achilles, and several other Greek heroes. In the Iliad, Homer depicts the wounded Eurypylus asking Patroclus to treat his injury with healing balms, knowledge that had been taught by wise Chiron to Achilles, and by Achilles in turn to Patroclus. In this way, Chiron appears as a foundational figure in the lineage of medical knowledge. Chiron was later struck in the foot by an arrow fired by Hercules, the arrow having been dipped in the poisonous blood of the Hydra of Lerna. The wound caused him unbearable pain. One version of the myth claims that Chiron healed himself using the herb that later became known as centauri. More commonly, however, the story tells that his suffering was made worse by the fact that he was immortal and could not die. Out of compassion, Hercules persuaded Jupiter to transfer Chiron's immortality to Prometheus. Chiron was then placed among the stars, where he became the constellation Sagittarius. The centaurs themselves were said to be a wild race inhabiting Thessaly. It is likely that they were originally skilled horse tamers and riders, and that from this reality the legend of their half-human, half-horse form eventually arose. Achilles. He carried a spear during the siege of Troy that was said to possess the remarkable power of healing the very wounds it inflicted. He is credited with discovering the medicinal properties of the plant Achillea millefolium, yarrow. However, Pliny leaves it uncertain whether Achilles healed the wounds of his companion Telephus using this plant, or by means of an ointment made from verdigris, which Achilles is also said to have invented. Eris, king of Arcadia, was another renowned pupil of Chiron. He is credited with introducing Silphion, also known as laser, a substance that became widely used in antiquity both as a medicine and as a culinary seasoning. For a long time, Silphion was believed to be the ancient name for asafoetida, but modern scholars have questioned this identification, suggesting instead that Silphion was derived from a plant known as Thapsia silphion. Eris is also said to have taught people the methods of collecting honey and cultivating the olive, further linking him with the early development of both healing practices and sustainable agriculture. Medea. Medea of Colchis is one of the most discussed ladies of mythical history. Euripides, Ovid, and other poets represented her for the purposes of their poems as a fiend of inhuman ferocity. Some more trustworthy historians believe that she was a princess who devoted a great deal of study to the medicinal virtues of the plants which grew in her country, and that she exercised her skill on the poor and sick of her country. Certainly the marvelous murders attributed to her must have been planned by a tragic poet to whom no conditions were impossible. Diodorus declares that the Corinthians stoned her and her sons, and afterwards paid Euripides 5 talents to justify their crime. Medea's claim to a place in this section is the adopted theory that she discovered the poisonous properties of colchicum, which derived its name from her country. Colchis had the reputation of producing many poisonous plants, hence the Latin expression venena colchica. Morpheus. According to Roman poets, Morpheus was the son, or chief minister, of Somnus, the god of sleep, who himself was believed to dwell in perpetual Cimmerian darkness. Morpheus took his name from morphe, Greek for form or shape, a reference to his extraordinary ability to assume any appearance he wished within dreams. Ovid recounts how Morpheus once appeared to Alcyone in a dream, taking the form of her husband, who had perished in a shipwreck. In this guise, he revealed to her every detail of the tragic event, leaving no doubt of its reality. Morpheus is traditionally depicted holding a poppy plant, its capsule said to possess the power to induce sleep when he touched those he wished to enchant. He was also shown with the wings of a butterfly, symbolizing his lightness and swift movement through the realm of dreams. In modern times, the chemist Sir Turner adopted Morpheus's name when he called the opium-derived alkaloid he discovered morphium, now known as morphine, a lasting testament to the god's enduring association with sleep and dreams. Pythagoras, who lived in the 6th century BCE, became the subject of so many legends that it is difficult to distinguish the philosopher from the charlatan. He was said to tame wild animals with a single word, to have descended into the underworld, to recall his previous incarnations, from the Trojan War to his own lifetime, and to have performed numerous miracles. These stories were most likely myths that naturally gather around great figures. What is certain is that through Pythagoras himself, or through his followers speaking in his name, a great body of precise knowledge, especially in mathematics, has come down to us. He was renowned across many fields of learning. His principal contribution to pharmacy was the invention of acetum psylli, a medicinal preparation made from squills. According to Pliny, Pythagoras wrote a treatise on squills, which he believed possessed magical properties. Pliny also states that he attributed magical virtues to cabbage, though it is unclear whether this refers to the vegetable known by that name today. Aniseed was another plant to which Pythagoras assigned special powers. He recommended holding aniseed in the left hand as a cure for epilepsy and prescribed anise-flavored wine, as well as mustard, to counteract the poisonous effects of scorpion stings. An antidotum Pythagoreae appears in certain ancient texts, but there is no reliable evidence that it was actually devised by the philosopher. The formula consisted of orris root, 18 drams and 2 scruples, gentian, 5 drams, ginger, 4.5 drams, black pepper 4 drams, and honey in sufficient quantity. Cosmas and Damian, regarded in many Catholic countries as the patron saints of pharmacy, were 2 brothers of Arab origin who lived in the city of Aegea in Cilicia, where they practiced medicine without accepting payment. Their refusal to profit from healing earned them great respect among the poor and sick. During the persecutions ordered by Emperor Diocletian in the 4th century, they were arrested and openly professed their Christian faith. They were first condemned to be drowned, but according to tradition, an angel miraculously cut their bonds and allowed them to reach the shore safely. They were then sentenced to be burned alive, yet the flames turned against their executioners, killing several of them. Next, the brothers were bound to crosses and shot at by archers, but the arrows curved away from them and struck their persecutors instead. Finally, they were beheaded, and witnesses claimed to see their souls ascending into heaven. For centuries, their tomb in Cyrrhus, Syria, became a renowned site of miraculous healings. In the 6th century, Emperor Justinian, believing he had been cured of a serious illness through their intercession, restored and fortified the city and built a magnificent church in their honor in Constantinople. Later, their relics were transferred to Rome, where Pope Felix consecrated a church dedicated to them. Throughout Catholic Europe, physicians and pharmacists honored Saints Cosmas and Damian for centuries, celebrating their feast day on September 27th, recognizing them as symbols of selfless healing, charity, and the sacred duty of medicine. The mandrake, Atropa mandragora, has held an extraordinary place in medical history. Its supposed power to cure infertility is famously mentioned in the biblical story of Leah and Rachel, Genesis 30 verses 14 to 16. However, it is not certain that the Hebrew word dadame truly refers to mandrake. Some biblical scholars dispute this interpretation, which originates from the Greek Septuagint translation. Other plants, such as lilies, violets, truffles, citrons, or various fruits, have been proposed instead. In the Song of Songs 7:14, the same plant is described as fragrant, whereas the mandrake is known for its unpleasant odor, further complicating the identification. Mandragora appears in ancient Chinese medical texts, and from Hippocrates onward, nearly every major writer on medicine treated it with deep respect. Hippocrates claimed that a small dose taken in wine, less than what would cause delirium, could relieve profound sadness and anxiety. Mandrake roots often grow in a forked shape, resembling the human body. Some were thought to be male, others female. This idea originated with Pythagoras, who named the plant anthropomorphon, human-shaped. According to popular superstition, the mandrake screamed like a human when pulled from the ground. This belief appears repeatedly in Shakespeare's works. In Romeo and Juliet, he writes of shrieks like mandrakes torn out of the earth that living mortals hearing them run mad. In Othello, mandrake is mentioned for its narcotic effects, and in Antony and Cleopatra, Cleopatra asks for mandrake to help her sleep through Antony's absence. In Macbeth, Banquo's reference to an insane root that takes the reason prisoner is also believed to allude to mandrake. There is substantial evidence that mandrake was used in ancient and medieval times not only as a sleep aid but also as an anesthetic. Dioscorides repeatedly emphasized this property. He described a decoction taken for severe pain, or before amputations and cauterization, to prevent suffering during surgery. Elsewhere, he mentioned its use in childbirth. In another passage, he described a wine made from the outer layer of the root, stating that those who drank it fell into a deep sleep lasting 3 to 4 hours. Physicians, he said, used it specifically when amputation or cauterization was required. Pliny also wrote about the narcotic effects of mandrake, and later authors frequently confirmed these observations. Josephus mentioned a mysterious plant called baras, believed to cure demonic possession but so dangerous to harvest that a dog was used to pull it from the ground, at the cost of the animal's life. This plant is widely thought to have been mandrake. A Persian source cited in Dr. Lee's Hebrew lexicon similarly describes a root that renders a person completely insensitive to pain, even during limb amputation. Later writers continued to describe mandrake's effects. Baptista Porta emphasized its power to induce deep sleep. In Schism, 1782, by A. G. Meissner, there is even a story of Weiss, surgeon to Augustus, king of Poland and elector of Saxony, who secretly administered a potion, its contents unknown, to the king and amputated a gangrenous foot while the ruler lay completely unconscious. Amaranth, ambrosia, and athanasia. Amaranth is the name given to a group of plants that includes varieties such as prince's feather and love lies bleeding. The word itself means immortal. It appears in the first epistle of St. Peter 5:4, where it refers to the amaranthine crown of glory, translated in the English Bible as the crown of glory that does not fade. The poet John Milton also mentions it, describing the immortal amaranth, a flower which once in paradise, near the tree of life, first began to bloom. In literature and symbolism, amaranth became a powerful emblem of eternal life and unfading honor. Ambrosia, the legendary food of the gods, is sometimes described as a drink, and at other times as a fragrant ointment. Ancient writers such as Dioscorides and Pliny also referred to ambrosia as a plant, though they never clearly identified which one. It was said to be 9 times sweeter than honey. Medieval herbalists associated the name ambrose herb with Chenopodium botrys, while other plants, such as Chenopodium ambrosioides, oak of Jerusalem, wild sage and field parsley, were also called ambrosia. In modern botany, the genus Ambrosia refers to plants related to wormwood, though their connection to the divine substance of myth remains symbolic rather than scientific. Athanasia, whose name literally means immortality, was shortened by old herbalists into what we now call tansy. This herb gained great fame because of its exalted name. In Lucian's Dialogues of the Gods, Jupiter tells Hercules to bring back the beautiful youth Ganymede, whom he has taken from earth, after letting him drink Athanasia, the drink of immortality, so that he may serve as the god's cupbearer. Unsurprisingly, ancient peoples searched eagerly for a real plant called Athanasia, believing it might grant eternal life to those who found and consumed it. Myrrh. She takes its name from Myrrha, the daughter of Cinyras, king of Cyprus. According to myth, Myrrha became pregnant and was driven from her home by her father, fleeing into the deserts of Arabia. In the version told by Ovid, the cause of her exile was even more tragic. She had conceived an unlawful desire for her own father and, through deception, had taken her mother's place beside him for one night. Overwhelmed by guilt and despair, Myrrha wandered alone in the wilderness. In her misery, she prayed to the gods that she might no longer belong either to the world of the living or to the realm of the dead. Moved by compassion, the gods answered her plea by transforming her into a tree. From this tree flowed a fragrant resin, myrrh, which has carried her name ever since, a symbol of sorrow, repentance, and silent suffering preserved in nature. Nepenthe. Nepenthe, more precisely Nepenthes, is described by Homer in the Odyssey as an Egyptian substance given to Helen, the wife of Menelaus, by Polydamna, the wife of Thonis, king of Egypt. The word itself comes from ene, not, and penthos, grief or sorrow, meaning that which banishes pain. Helen mixed this substance into a mirth-inspiring bowl for Telemachus, a drink said to lift the burden of sorrow, wipe away tears, and calm the mind completely. Its effect would last an entire day. No matter what horrors surrounded the drinker, he would remain serene, detached, and emotionally untouched. Homer's description has sparked centuries of debate. Was Nepenthe purely a poetic invention, or did an actual Egyptian drug with such properties exist? Some ancient commentators, including Plutarch and Philostratus, believed Homer was simply giving a material form to Helen's charm, eloquence, and soothing presence. Yet this interpretation struggles with the fact that Homer explicitly states the substance came from Egypt. Several ancient authorities attempted to identify the real Nepenthe. Theophrastus suggested opopanax, while Dioscorides may have referred to the same resin under the name nectarion, which he also described as Egyptian. Pliny claimed the plant was Helenium, though it is unclear whether this corresponds to modern elecampane. Other candidates proposed over time include borage, bugloss, supported by Galen, saffron, favored by Rhazes, mandragora, associated with Cleopatra, opium, Indian hemp, hashish, henbane, and thorn apple. Opium, however, seems unlikely, as Homer emphasizes joy and emotional clarity rather than dullness. Among all suggestions, Indian hemp appears to fit the poetic description best. The pitcher plants later named Nepenthes by Linnaeus are certainly unrelated. A detailed historical discussion of the subject can be found in an early 19th century pharmaceutical study by J. Viry. Atropa belladonna. She has been surrounded by legend for centuries, and even the origins of its name are wrapped in myth and speculation. The name Atropa comes from Atropos, the eldest of the three fates in Greek mythology, the one who cut the thread of life. While this name suits a deadly plant, it is not uniquely appropriate to belladonna, as many poisonous plants could claim the same association. The name belladonna, meaning beautiful lady, has been explained in several ways by early herbalists, none of which were supported by solid historical evidence. One story claims that Italian women used cosmetics made from the berries to whiten their skin. Another suggests that Spanish women applied the plant to their eyes to dilate their pupils, enhancing the dark brilliance of their gaze, a practice that gave rise to its enduring reputation in beauty lore. A darker explanation attributes the name to Lucota, an Italian poisoner who allegedly used belladonna to murder beautiful women. In classical medical literature, belladonna is thought to have been described by Dioscorides as Morella furiosum let hail and by Pliny as Strychnus manicon. Galen employed it in the treatment of cancerous conditions, and this medical use was revived in the 17th century, when infusions of the leaves were administered both internally and externally. There is little doubt that belladonna played a role in the potions and philters of sorcerers. Like mandragora, it was not believed to stimulate passion directly. Instead, its power lay in its ability to paralyze the will, rendering its victims passive, confused, and helpless, an effect far more dangerous than any supposed aphrodisiac quality. Lesser Centauri, Erythrea centaurium, is traditionally said to owe its name to Chiron the centaur, the legendary healer and teacher of medicine who instructed Aesculapius. According to ancient belief, Chiron either discovered the healing properties of this plant or used it to treat his own wound, and through this association the herb became linked with his name. The legend connecting Chiron to centauri has already been described, and the plant's reputation as a medicinal herb was strengthened by this mythological origin. Over time, centauri came to symbolize the transmission of healing knowledge from divine or semi-divine figures to humankind, an example of how early pharmacy blended practical herbal medicine with myth and storytelling. Mint, mentha. Mint takes its name from Minthe, a nymph of the underworld who was loved by Pluto, Hades. When Proserpina, Persephone, Pluto's wife, discovered this relationship, she was consumed by jealousy. As punishment, she transformed Minthe into a humble plant. From that moment on, the fragrant herb bore her name, preserving her memory in scent rather than in form. Thus mint became a symbol of lost beauty, jealousy, and transformation, its refreshing aroma standing in contrast to the dark myth from which it arose. Dittany, Origanum dictamnus. Dittany was believed in antiquity to possess extraordinary powers for healing wounds. In the legend, Aeneas, wounded in battle, was treated by Iapix, a skilled healer who had been personally instructed by Apollo. Yet despite his knowledge and remedies, the wound refused to heal. Moved by compassion for her suffering son, Venus descended from heaven wrapped in a cloud. She gathered fresh dittany from Mount Ida and secretly added it to the potion Iapix was preparing. Along with the herb, she mixed in a drop of ambrosial nectar. Instantly, Aeneas's pain vanished, the bleeding stopped, the weapon was easily withdrawn, and his strength returned. From this story, dittany gained its reputation as a divinely inspired healing herb, capable of accomplishing what even the greatest mortal physicians could not. Mythical animals in pharmacy. Phoenix became a powerful symbol for alchemists, and later a popular emblem for pharmacists. According to Herodotus, this sacred bird, worshipped by the Egyptians, was about the size of an eagle, with magnificent gold and purple feathers and a radiant purple crest. Its eyes were said to sparkle like stars. The phoenix lived alone in the Arabian desert and existed as a single being at any given time. Its lifespan was believed to be 500 years. When it sensed the end of its life approaching, it built its own funeral pyre from fragrant, spiced woods. The sun itself ignited the fire, and the bird was consumed in flames. From the ashes, or from the marrow of its bones, a small worm emerged, quickly growing into a new phoenix. This successor carried the ashes of its parent to Heliopolis, the city of the sun, before returning to Arabia to live out its own long life. Jewish traditions added further meaning to the legend. One tale says that when Eve offered the forbidden fruit to all creatures in Eden, only the phoenix refused, and thus escaped the curse of death. Another story tells how, during the flood, the phoenix remained silent in Noah's Ark while other animals clamored for food. Pleased by its selflessness, Noah blessed it with eternal life. Because of these stories, the phoenix became a lasting symbol of immortality, rebirth, and eternal renewal. The unicorn occupied a unique place between myth, medicine, and belief. Ancient writers such as Aristotle, Pliny, and Aelian described a one-horned beast, and medieval tradition attributed extraordinary antidotal powers to its horn. Drinking vessels made from unicorn horn were believed to protect against poison, convulsions, and epilepsy, provided the liquid was consumed shortly before or after poisoning. In the Middle Ages, unicorn horn was regarded as a cure for plague, malignant fevers, snake bites, and rabid dog attacks. It was often prepared as a jelly mixed with saffron and cochineal. Because these horns were said to be worth 10 times the price of gold, only royalty and the very wealthy could afford them. Many of the so-called unicorn horns later proved to be narwhal tusks, some measuring up to 7 feet long. In the Bible, the word unicorn appears several times in the Authorized Version, but modern scholars agree it referred not to a mythical creature, but to the wild ox, aurochs, a powerful, untamable animal once native to the Middle East and Europe. Despite growing skepticism, the unicorn remained a powerful symbol. It entered British royal heraldry under James I and was widely used by apothecaries, including as supporters in the arms of the Society of Apothecaries. The dragon entered pharmacy not through the creature itself, but through a substance known as dragon's blood, a deep red resin long believed to be the dragon's literal blood. In reality, dragon's blood was a resin obtained from plants such as Dracaena draco, first traded from Socotra by Arab merchants, possibly acquiring its name in China, where dragons were highly revered. Ancient writers like Dioscorides referred to it as cinnabar. In Old Pharmacy, dragon's blood was used as a mild astringent and included in famous remedies such as Helvetius's styptic pills and Locatelli's balsam. Today, it is mainly used as a varnish pigment, especially for violins. Folk traditions attributed magical qualities to it. In some regions, dragon's blood was burned as a love charm, believed to restore affection from an unfaithful lover. The legendary dragon tree of Tenerife, possibly the oldest tree in the world, was already enormous when Alexander von Humboldt documented it in 1799, measuring 48 feet in circumference. These ancient stories have traveled across centuries, through myth, belief, and imagination, carried by those who sought meaning in the unknown. If you enjoyed this journey into forgotten legends and symbolic creatures, please consider liking this video and supporting the channel. Your support allows these stories to be retold and preserved for future listeners. Thank you for listening, and may the echoes of these myths remain with you until we meet again.